Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for attending the Business Sustainability Talks. We've had the opportunity to run these talks, both Shift Eco as well as the Umbrella Institute, and invite some fabulous speakers. This is about the fifth talk that we're doing, and we have the opportunity to have the lovely Alida here with us today, who's going to help take us through her point of view on sustainability, net zero, and share tips, tricks, and things that we can do as organizations to further our sustainability journey. So before much ado, I'll leave it to you, Alida, to introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about the amazing work that you've been doing.
Thank you so much, Namrata. Really a pleasure to be here today. A little bit about myself is I'm the head of sustainability for the Middle East and Africa regions at JLL. I'm also the senior advisor for the Climate Champions team for the built environment with the High Level Champions team. So it's really great to be here and talk about one of the topics I think that are most sought after and sometimes a little bit confusing for some. So I'm hoping that we're able to demystify some of that.
We'd love to hear about JLL's sustainability journey, the offerings JLL has for sustainability.
Excellent. So yes, JLL's been on their sustainability journey for almost since maybe 15 years now, over 15 years. And what we started doing is really helping our clients with their own sustainability agendas in a time when perhaps sustainability wasn't as prominent in the world. And we made our first global commitments to address our own carbon footprint back in 2011. So that was a long time ago. And in 2018, as part of our purpose really to shape the future of what real estate looks like to make sure that we're being responsible, the firm decided that they were going to set science-based targets to cut out all our scopes for scopes 1, 2, and 3 emissions. So that was a really big undertaking. And since then, we have joined a number of different commitments. So in 2020, JLL signed the World Green Building Council's Net Zero Carbon Buildings Commitment, pledging to only occupy offices which are net zero carbon in operations. And hopefully, when you guys have the chance, I'll give you a tour of our offices. So anybody who'd like to come and see, I'd love to do that.
Great.
And then in 2021 is when JLL really announced their net zero commitment towards for 2040. And that's the journey we're currently on. And we're using the SBTI standards to measure ourselves. So it's been quite a long journey. It's been exciting. It's also one that when you're on that journey yourself, you understand the pain that you inflict on others when you ask them to start their own journey.
Doing it yourself makes you connect with the topic so much more. So I want to take a step back, Alida. I mean, a lot of people are talking about net zero, and I guess the audience we have here today are sustainability enthusiasts, professionals. But let's take a step back and think about what is net zero and maybe define net zero first before we get into what JLL is doing for net zero.
Sure. So I think there's many different ways people define net zero, but the way I look at net zero is really reducing all of your greenhouse gas emissions as much as possible within an organization, and then using the last little bit that's left that you can't do anything with to really offset. And, there's the difference between net zero, like what does it really mean versus what does carbon neutral mean? And really what I mean when I say carbon neutral is that you're looking at all of how do you reduce all your emissions as much as you use versus how much you can sort of reduce, but you don't have to offset, right? So you're using it as kind of a balancing act. So the way we define it is look at net zero in a way that do everything possible and always leave offsets till the end. But you need to, because we are at a time where technology is not as advanced as we would love for it to be, there is still a need to offset.
So now coming back to JLL and JLL's approach to net zero, can you share, JLL's sustainability strategy and what their net zero plans are?
So, as JLL, what we do is we really are because we've signed up for our own net zero commitments, we're really looking at how we can help others come along that journey, because that's really a responsibility now that we've set up our own targets. So the way I approach helping organizations set their own net zero strategy is, if you look at it in 4 parts, how do you start developing a really robust business plan? Because sustainability plan is not different from your actual plan. So really setting out a clear pathway. What are the targets? How do you measure? How do you work with your stakeholders to get the buy-in? Second is enabling your businesses to get net zero ready. And what we really mean by that is we develop a really structured approach for tackling organizations' assets, be it or your operational standards, how you procure your materials, how you buy your supplies, your energy. The third piece of that is looking at how do you have a smooth portfolio transition. So taking into consideration, what are the material selections, for example, what's material to your organization? How can you optimize your energy? So if you're looking at it from an asset perspective, you might even have asset leasing approaches and the right procurement approaches. The fourth is really monitoring and disclosing your progress. And I think that's the key. That's where the rubber hits the road, because without having really robust measuring systems in place, it's really hard to be able to be credible in the market. So that's kind of a 4-stepped approach. I'm happy to go over in more detail.
You talked a little bit about getting buy-in, and I assume to start the net zero journey, there are many different stakeholders involved. So my point is, if you can give us a walkthrough on how those different elements could work and what to keep in mind for each of them.
Sure. I think the first thing that has to happen is you need buy-in from the C-suite. You need your leader to really buy into this, really be behind it and drive it. And the reason I say that is the board commitment and the CEO commitment is so important, because if the organization is to embed sustainability into their strategy, it requires the C-suite to be bought in. Post that, it's about transparency across the organization and simplifying the why. So once you simplify why you're going on this journey and are extremely transparent in the journey itself, and I focus on the word journey because truly sustainability is a journey. And whether it's a journey along the spectrum with your stakeholders, who are your clients or your investors, your buyers, and then your key stakeholders within your organization, which kind of goes deep. And throughout that process, you need to engage stakeholders at multiple points. You need to be able to upskill your staff within the organization so that they can start coming along the journey. And I think sometimes we forget about that. We're so excited to start on our journey that we forget how important it is to help reskill our own staff. What if you don't do that? You risk starting to cause anxiety within people within the organization, because they start to feel that their jobs are at risk. They don't know what they're doing. Things are happening. Gossip starts. So you want to try to avoid that. So it's really, really key that we do that part. The other piece is really working along the other stakeholders or key stakeholders who you need to interact with, who are going to help you along the journey. So for each organizations, we sit with our clients to figure out who are those key influencers. And once you figure those out, you start to have conversations with them to get their buy-in, but also to explain the why. And it's so crucial. And one of course, your key stakeholders are, if you're a publicly listed company, is everybody who's invested, your shareholders. So simplifying that why across all your stakeholders, mapping the stakeholders, and not just doing it. It's not a once and done exercise. It's an iterative process. And that's what's really important, because you need to understand the problems. Then you need to be able to map the problems. And then you need to figure out how you're going to deal with those problems, and then circle back again and again.
So let's circle back and let's go back to JLL. And I mean, of course, you're working with a lot of clients, helping them with their strategy. But now that you all are doing it internally, what can you tell us about your strategy? How are you all focusing on net zero? I know you all are in the beautiful ICD Brookfield building. It's such a pity that I couldn't come here today. Hopefully, next time. But what can you tell us more about how you all went about your own approach?
I think it all started off with really having clarity on the fact that if we're going to help our clients to go on their own journey, it's really important for us to be on our journey. And like I mentioned, we started the journey, almost over a decade ago. And we've just gotten more and more, getting better at it every day. And it's, thinking about how we can do things differently.
Yeah.
So it's always challenging the status quo, and I encourage others to do the same. Like, we can be ambitious, but there's never an end goal. Sustainability is truly where the needle keeps shifting. So for our own journey, like I mentioned, we had said that, for us, it's really important for us to occupy spaces that sort of lend to the same values that we have as an organization. And ICD Brookfield is an amazing experience. I'll tell you, I've designed many LEED certified buildings. I've never had the opportunity to be in a LEED certified platinum building. And I tell you, the experience as employees in that facility has just been fabulous. We've started to see a lot more collaboration happen because, first of all, the building is so beautiful, but even downstairs, if you didn't have space in your own offices, we have space downstairs where we can go and collaborate. We are starting to find that things are much more accessible because its walkability is very important. So that's started to reduce our own carbon footprint in the sense that people have access to metro to take to work. We also measure a lot of how we travel. So whenever, we say, okay, I want to go to this thing, we have to have a justification for why we want to go where we want to go. And we have to be able to always justify the footprints that we leave behind when we travel. The other things I've also started to notice is the factor that we're in a LEED certified building. I've started to see just in myself that my productivity has increased. I don't know how many of you come to work and you kind of feel like, if you're in a room that's extremely cold or it's extremely debilitating because it's so warm, your ability to think sort of gets clouded. And I've started to notice, because these beautiful big windows, the air is so clean, it just seems like my productivity has increased significantly, which is amazing, right? So that's why I say to people, it's not just about doing it, it's about feeling it, and it's about embracing it. But there are it's not easy. And I want to keep that out there, that the journey of sustainability is not a fast track journey. It's one that's really tough. For us, it's not about just travel, but it's always making the right decisions when you're even buying stuff. Like, is this the right thing to buy? Is there a better way to do it? Do we even need to do it? So many things that you might have found easy to do as business as usual was many years ago is not as easy anymore going forward. So we work with our clients very much on that as well.
No, I love that you say that sustainability is a journey. We've been speaking to a lot of companies, and a lot of people want to get ahead too fast, and they don't understand it's an iterative process and there are different elements attached to it. So, no, we completely hear you that it takes a lot, and and it's really interesting to hear about the LEED certification and hear more about how the impact it has on employee well-being, productivity, because it has different layers to it, which a lot of people don't understand. Circling back, Anne-Marie, you had a question?
I have a question because it feeds into, sorry. So I think what you're saying, Alida, is historically also sustainability was very much a big environmental focus, right? But with the shift to, for instance, net zero buildings, there's a big understanding that it's about the people, both getting them involved and just making sure that they have well-being in there. So how do you make sure that you balance these ESG factors in your sustainability as well, that it's not just about the environmental and the carbon emissions and the net zero, but also that it's a well-being and maybe
Yeah,
Like it
I
can.
think it's always been a sort of a value proposition that we never really took apart. But many people like to see it as the E and the S and the G. We always look at sustainability as one package, and because without people, there's not much of a journey you're on, because it's going to be who you're going to take along with you. And I really think sometimes we forget about the people in the journey of sustainability. Yes, we want to be environmentally responsible, but taking people along in that journey, being responsible. And what I really mean about that is you can interact with people as your stakeholders, as your employees, as your community. So there's many interactions, but at the end of the day, think of it, I always personalize it for myself. What would I want if I was going on my own personal sustainability journey? I want to make my life easier. I want to make sure that I'm being responsible in the way that I behave on my day-to-day. I want to make sure the things that I'm buying are are being sourced as responsibly as possible. So the more you can personalize it, the journey becomes that much more powerful, because and I think where sustainability is at risk is when you start to make it a checkbox exercise. And that's when, we've spoken a little bit about greenwashing previously when we were talking about sustainability, and really need to avoid that, because as much as sustainability can be a brand enhancement and to enhance your brand value, it can also do a lot for brand reputational risk. So we have to be very careful on that.
How even something like the word sustainability, we can see it in many places, right? It's being used. Do you have a way where where you can put the word sustainability, or where you avoid it?
I don't know if there's a way to avoid it, because it's become a buzzword. But I think if you as an organization want to start on your sustainability journey, it's really important to set your boundaries. What do I mean when I mean sustainability? Because sustainability means so many things to so many people. So it's about really being clear to everybody who knows when you say, I'm going to be doing sustainability, put the boundaries around it, be robust in the way that you measure, be transparent, communicate as much as you can, and then talk about, your next steps. So everybody kind of wants to do the fast track, because, COP is coming up and everybody wants to start on their sustainability journey. And it's so exciting to see that the uptake has been fabulous. However, I would just say it's okay to start small.
How do you, both internally in JLL and also advise your clients, how do you make sure that tracking is happening for different parts of sustainability?
So I think data is the most important piece, and probably the most difficult piece to deal with in your sustainability journey. Getting a really strong platform where you can see very transparently how to measure what you're saying you're going to do. We use our own platform. It's called the Carbon Pathfinder, which is kind of a decarbonization planning technology that we use. And it gives us data, very kind of robust, in the moment, data-driven insights as to what's going on. So as JLL, we have our own technology that we use. And what it does is it helps us visualize what our portfolio will look like in the future. It helps sort of provide us with gaps. It gives us, here's where your data gaps are, here's how you need to action out your decarbonization pathway. It helps us kind of think through, the what if scenarios. So in our own journey, it's been a very key tool. And we've been using that a lot with our clients as well.
Yeah. And do you also have KPIs either for specific titles or for specific departments, so that there's someone who owns some parts of the sustainability KPIs?
I think sustainability is integrated into everything we do, like I'd mentioned. So I think I'd have to circle back with you as to how many people and what it's kind of embedded within the actual HR processes. But I would say that it's front and center in everything we do.
So we've spoken about your client sustainability journey, but really it's all linked together, isn't it? And this is what we can see more and more, that if you don't do it and I don't do it, then no one else can do it around us. Like that sustainability is a collective journey, right, for all the different companies. Can you see that it's happening more and more in your sector together, that we're building this journey together?
I think globally it's happening a lot more than it is regionally. I think regionally we're a little bit further behind in our sustainability kind of proposition, our understanding. However, that doesn't mean that I don't think it's going to take much longer before the region kind of accelerates its transition. I think COP being in the region is an amazing sort of a pathway. I feel like it's the highway to sustainability right now, which is great. But I think it's also important for people to start talking to each other. Sustainability is a value proposition that helps you really enhance many different parts of your organization. So for example, what the trends I'm starting to see is that you have greater access to investment, right? If you are a developer, builder, if you have sustainability as your value proposition, you're able to attract more foreign direct investments, especially when they have their own sustainability agendas and are not able to invest in non-sustainable developments, for example. The other we've started, and we talked about this a little bit, is brand reputation. Corporate reputations are, of course, increasing as you sort of embed sustainability. And that's because you're investing in people, you're investing in your business, you're trying to reduce your carbon footprint. And you also, I think one thing people don't really talk about as much is that you're able to attract the best talent when you have a really good value proposition. More and more youth who are graduating from university are looking for organizations that are sustainable, and they ask for those reports. So when you don't have it, or you say, we haven't quite thought about it, they may think twice about joining.
I completely think you're completely right. And I can see that there was a global survey that came out a few weeks ago that said that for two different, either Generation C or Gen X, that as much as 40 to 50% don't really think that their organization that they work in are doing enough, right? So they want to help something inside the company, and it's really valuable to them to be part of it.
Absolutely. And they're so eager to help and look for different ways. So you bring innovation too. As you attract this type of talent, you attract innovation, because they're looking at ways of sort of optimizing and reducing the carbon footprints of organizations. The other thing is that you start to attract a lot of higher asset values. So for example, ICD Brookfield is a great example for us. Rents are a lot higher in ICD Brookfield than it is in perhaps neighboring buildings. However, we're willing to pay that rent premium because we're in an organization that's on their own journey, is helping us on our journey. So it becomes a value proposition. The other things that those developers who choose not to go on the journey are really looking at brown discounts in the future of their, they're going to start because as you get closer and closer to 2040, 2050, 2060, depending on which, target your country has set, the closer you get and the less you're compliant, the more exposure you have, right, of stranded assets. And then, of course, I think it's just an amazing competitive advantage. So I think globally, we're seeing that trend, and I'm starting to see that a lot in the region. Although I must say that most people are earlier in their journey, which is beneficial because you can learn from the others.
Definitely. This is also what we're doing here today, isn't it? And
Exactly.
I think if anyone in the crowd has any questions, you are most welcome to write them in the comments, or you can raise a hand as well. We would love to hear from you. Now you've been on the journey for SBTi, science-based targets. There's a lot of specific things that are really complicated, right? But once you start to open these boxes, like you say, you actually get help, or you have some specific questions you can also ask other companies who are maybe more advanced.
Yeah. And I think it's about kind of creating communities of practice. And I love the fact that you guys are doing this, because you're creating a community amongst people who are in this, kind of along this journey. And it's, some people think, oh, I can't say anything because, they'll know all my strategy. But I think it's more about, how can we help each other get better every day? And you don't have to share all your secrets about your strategy, but you can always share challenges, because I think coming together collectively, and especially in a region that hasn't matured as much in their sustainability journey, we start to see a lot of challenges, be it legislations, policy, financial incentives. So the more and more people start to voice those types of concerns, the more you start to see that, things can start to shift. Yeah,
definitely. And what about something like, you can see that if you are a traditional company, then you go about your day as usual. but there's a lot of partnership opportunities around sustainability, right? Where you can actually elevate your company, just like you say, also with their brand value, but you can actually create these very powerful partnerships with the governments and institutions.
Yeah.
Is that something you're focusing on
I think so. You know, one of the things that we're doing right now is working really closely with some of our clients and their supply chain. Because, you know, demystifying the scope 3 supply chain is quite the challenge right now. And I think globally people are facing it's not a regional issue. The fact that technology is not as mature as we'd like it to be, but there's innovation happening every day. However, we can't technically get to net zero unless we decarbonize our scope 3 emissions, which means our supply chain. So working very, very closely right now with clients who are helping their supply chain to say, here, we're one of the biggest clients for you. Here's the next 10 of our biggest competitors, but we still all use you. How might we think about coming together to change that value proposition? Because it's not about one, it's about all, right? Because as technology improves for one, and hopefully with economies of scale, prices will start to come down. We'll start to see more alternatives. But I think we have to be okay with what we have today. And so it's not so rigid. I think we need to be a little bit more flexible when it comes to sustainability. Where you don't have alternatives, it's okay to do things business as usual. Just be transparent. Here's why we can't do what, you know, rather than keeping it up there for people to guess.
Yeah. So this is also one of the things that we try to work on a lot, this behavior shift, right? And this is not for one individual person or for one individual company, but it's really creating new systems and new ways of thinking. What do you think about behavior? Like it's a big challenge even inside a company, right? Creating new structures or new ways of doing things.
It's uncomfortable behavior. Like humans don't like change. That's just a fact of life. None of us like to be uncomfortable. However, I challenge you guys who are around, you know, on the phone today or online today, to start thinking about your own sustainability journey in your own home. Start yourself and then join the journey of your organizations, because then it becomes easier. For example, I have deliberately chosen not to buy a second car. It's tough. It's not easy living in Dubai, you know, where you need to be zipping around here and there. It's not easy. But am I going to be on that journey for a really long time? Let's see. Maybe I'll buy an electric car when it starts to get a little bit, you know, more viable in terms of its own carbon footprint. But I think we need to all start going on that journey. And behavioral shift is about also educating yourself, right? Upskilling yourselves and challenging status quo, and then helping others understand the why. You know, why is it so important? Because I think if we start to focus on the fact that we have 7 years to really stop any catastrophic climate impacts and really make it real, because we're all working so hard every day around the table. We work towards, either some are working towards building a better future for their families, others are doing it because they have other ambitions. But if we don't have a future, there's a problem, right?
Yeah, I completely agree. And we see on a daily basis, like Namrata and Sukriti and I, and we talk about that there's a lot of communications that it doesn't matter if you do anything sustainable in your home, because it's really about making everybody do the same. But I think what we can also see in organizations is that once you have people who drive it, like it's really about passion and people. If someone says, no, let's like go zero plastic, or let's try and think about the water use, then we have these powerful individuals, right? So we have to give them the power to change something.
Yeah, absolutely.
And also the ripple effect of it, right? Like today, if I try to do something, my family will be exposed to it. I go to work, my colleagues will be exposed to it. So the ripple effect of individual action is quite important as well.
Absolutely. And I think it's about every single person has the ability to make a change. Even if it's that 0.0001, it doesn't matter. It's a step in the right direction. And if enough people started thinking that way, that I can make a change, you'd start seeing a movement. And that's what it's all about. It takes just a little bit to get that wagon going. And I think also, if you don't get on the journey, you risk being left behind, right? For those who, and it's kind of like AI. people are scared that it's happening because they're like, it's going to take over our jobs, it's going to do this. However, if you actually use it to your benefit, it actually makes you much faster, much more productive. So it's just a different way of thinking. And I think behavioral change is probably the most important thing that's going to help us become successful in our journey.
And it really comes down to like business leadership, doesn't it? Saying that we're committed to doing something, for instance, a net zero strategy, and this is what we need to do, and like continuous communication around a specific thing, and making sure that it trickles down into like the,
And it's also about making money. Let's not forget that doing the right thing helps you make money at the end of it is a big business. There is value in it. You have a little bit of upfront costs, and that's, goes with anything that you implement, whether you're doing a technology implementation, whether you're doing financial implementation, everything has upfront cost, but there's a really good return on investments. And we're starting to see a lot of some of our biggest clients saying, we did this because it was the right thing to do and we knew it had value, but we are making loads of money. So I think we need to talk a little bit about that as well, because the cost of action is not as steep as the cost of inaction.
We see a shift in that, like over the last few years. It was a lot to do with companies not having a budget, or not really, or fearing that it was a lot more expensive to do something sustainable or change behavior. But now we can see that the financial value is actually driving it, right? You get more efficient employees, you get more efficient buildings, you get sometimes just a lot more value because you're changing a way of doing things. So that is shifting in the region. We would love to talk about some of the challenges and things that are being overcome, because I'm sure that internally that they on a daily basis that you have things that you need to overcome to change things, as you say. Do you have like places where you say now we tackle a new challenge, or like do you have timelines for taking up new challenges?
I think there's so many challenges that come your way every day. And sometimes it's about stakeholder challenges, like dealing with different types of stakeholders. Maybe you missed a stakeholder during your mapping. That's one. Sometimes it's actually regulatory that becomes challenging, because you can look at it from two ways. So it's either regulatory when you're trying to implement something, when cost differential becomes really impactful. So sometimes our clients will say, when they're smaller organizations, that it's really hard for me to do better than business as usual initially, because I just don't have the working capital. So those are different ways. So we have to work with financial institutions that they're to look at innovative ways of getting financing for those who want to start their journey. And I think sometimes we don't think about how much benefit you can get from your financiers. If you actually talk about, I want to transition my organization, what types of incentives can you give me? Because they too, financial institutions also have their KPIs for lending money to more responsible organizations. So I think those could be challenges. Other challenges is just, I think, like I mentioned earlier, behavioral challenges is the hardest ones to deal with. But it's getting better. It's about educating every day, because I you know how many people I meet every day, and you talk about the same thing. I just don't know what's this big deal about sustainability. And when they really start to understand the real issue, that it's about the future, and it's not just about making money, it's not about just saving the planet, it's about our own futures. Yeah. And that then you can start bringing in, okay, it's important, why it's important. The catastrophic impacts of inaction is so severe. And I think I don't know if a human mind can comprehend that to some extent. Mm-hmm. And that's where I say language is one of the biggest barriers in sustainability. We speak in a language which most people don't understand: carbon footprint, net zero, adaptation, resilience. People can't comprehend what we mean. So we need to be able to simplify language and speak in a way that a normal person in a day-to-day engagement can understand. So that would be my biggest call of action here, is for those who are around, if you have ways to simplify language, do it, because sometimes you yourself just don't realize that people, you've lost them just after the first sentence.
Yeah, and we can also see, like, we work a lot with the training programs and ensuring that there's awareness programs, but very often these programs are implemented on a specific level, like it's top management level or senior management. And it means that they have all these lovely words and concepts to talk about afterwards. But then when you have to trickle it down, then it starts to become more and more difficult, right? So like upskilling the whole workforce is really important in this perspective.
Absolutely.
Big businesses are showing a lot of sustainability journeys. We see them here. We see the same companies quite a lot over and over. What about, you must work with a lot of SMEs or startups of different kinds, and they have emissions too, right? How do we make sure that, for instance, in real estate and infrastructure, that these small companies understand that they also have emissions in your carbon journey?
Yeah, I think it doesn't matter the scale of your organization. I think you all need to start being responsible, and it's about understanding where you're at. So I always say these are the kind of questions I ask organizations. You know, where are you at in your journey? You know, why is it important to you? Start thinking about how you compare to others. For example, you know, people who have similar organizations as you, are they doing anything? Can you be a leader in this? And then start ideating as to what's possible. You know, what scenarios are possible? What are the constraints you might face? What assets are at risk if you're speaking from a real estate perspective? And then what are your ambitions? And if you don't have them, how can we help you set them? What is needed? Like, you need to really start thinking about what investments you need to go along this journey. And then what are the changes that you can anticipate that's going to happen? Are you expecting legislations in the next little while to change? Are things happening globally that will probably influence things that are happening in the region? And then start the journey really on a sort of an informed basis. So I would say that even just because you're a small organization doesn't mean that you can't start. Everybody has a footprint. Everybody's doing something. Every small piece of action that you take has a long-lasting impact. But just be careful of how you greenwash it. So, and I keep saying that because it's so important for us to be really clear, because the last thing you want to do is start a journey that you're really excited about, but then that journey leads you to catastrophe, right?
Yeah.
Because
and like you say, it's very often because of you can't wait to put out something, but it's not really verified, or like it's about like holding your horses, isn't it? And making sure that you actually can verify and make sure that what you're saying is correct.
Yeah, and there's nothing wrong in starting that. We're just starting our journey. You don't have to make claims. And I think that's where we need to get away from is greenwashing is by leading to claims like we're fully sustainable organizations or we're net zero. You can start by saying we're starting our journey. Yeah. This is what it looks like. Be transparent. And it's interesting how many people will help you along that journey and how many people you attract on that journey. So
yeah, it's a partnership thing.
Absolutely.
And I think also it's very interesting to see that JLL has changed your net zero strategy over the years, right? Because as soon as you start open this box, you start to understand like the real challenges. So then, yeah, you change direction, don't you? And you have to figure out how to reach it.
Exactly. And I think the more ambitious everybody gets around you, the more you have to start becoming more ambitious as organizations. Yeah. Because without that, you really run the risk of becoming obsolete in your journey.
Yeah.
So Alida, I know you've talked a lot about JLL. COP28 is coming up, and I'm aware you're part of the Climate Champions team. Can you share a little bit more with us about your work there and a little bit more about COP?
Sure. I think COP being in the region is a historical moment for us. You know, it's the first time being held in the UAE. Last year it was in Africa, in Sharm el-Sheikh, which is the first time that it's happening in kind of our region, right? Middle East, Africa region. This COP stands to be even more significant because it's a moment where the global stocktake will happen, where all countries will come together. They will talk about what they have done so far and what actions they need to take in order to live up to the Paris Agreement. So it's a historical moment. And I would say anybody and everybody who wants to get involved should look at positioning themselves in ways to capitalize on these opportunities. And what I mean by that is there's two zones within the COP platform. There's the blue zone, which is sort of the dignitary zone. And then there's the green zone, which is the open zone. Everybody's trying to get into the blue zone, and it's been, I've been told that it's probably where all the negotiations happen, and it's, a little bit more boring than the others, but it's an important zone because this is where, a lot of the CEOs and organizations come together. But the green zone is equally important. I sometimes don't think people give it enough value. And I see this time, I think the green zone, the way at least I've seen initial plans, is that the green zone is going to be a lot bigger than it usually is. And I can see a lot of engagement and ways of sharing lessons learned will happen there. So I would say that people should start coming to go into the green zone. Take your offices, take people so that they can start seeing what's happening. That's what I would say. Lots up in the air still in terms of COP. A solid agenda hasn't been released yet. We have the themes that have been released. If those who haven't seen it, we'd be happy to share the link with you guys.
Great. That would be wonderful, Alida. I think we're all intrigued, and I think everyone is interested to know what's going on. I know a high-level plan has been shared, but any further information would be great as well.
It's a platform, right, for medium to large organization and even small, to position yourself as leaders, because this is the one platform where you get like over 190 countries are coming together in one space, where if you choose to start that journey, you can position yourself, be seen as leaders, and learn from each other and create those partnerships that are required. And I think that's an amazing platform at COP, is to create those partnerships, figure out who's coming, who's attending, how can you meet with them, and talk about coming together to unravel what climate action really looks like.
Yeah. And I think I'm going to follow that up with a question that Jyotika has asked, which is quite interesting. There's a lot of regional focus on sustainability right now. And you have companies who are looking at starting their journey, a lot of people who want to showcase themselves at COP. But do you think this focus and this momentum will be sustained post-COP, post the year of sustainability? And if not, do you have a strategy to work with this and the mindset, behavioral change required for this so that it's more long-term and more purposeful?
COP is presenting a platform that's helping people start their journey, and I think it's great. However, COP is only a 12-day event. In totality, it's a 2-week event that happens. And Jyotika, I think you ask a very important question, which is what happens after. And I think that you'll start seeing that I don't believe the UAE is going to back away from the kinds of ambitions it has. I think it's going to accelerate ambition post-COP. You can start seeing a lot of movement happening. So for those who've started their journey, I think kudos to you, because you're starting a little bit ahead of the curve. And for those who haven't, maybe post-COP is another time where you can start. However, I don't believe people will start regressing because I see UAE kind of accelerating their ambition post-COP. But these are all hearsay. We don't know exactly what's going to happen, but I don't believe, those who, and I reiterate this, and those who decide not to do anything post-COP, really, it's a shame for your organization, because if you start on a journey, you might as well capitalize on the benefits of it too, because you're going to incur a lot more costs up front if you don't follow through with it.
We now have Nazish asking about reporting and disclosure standards. What are these different standards that are commonly used by companies as a benchmark?
So generally speaking, a lot of people are using the SBTI rating system, especially if you have your net zero ambitions. Others use GRI. However, I think the reporting landscape globally is like an alphabet soup, which is there's so much out there, and it's really dependent on what is your hope and your ambitions for using certain types of reporting. So you have to look at what is your organization, where do you want to go, and what's the best rating system to use. There's no fast answer to that.
Fair enough. And is this, you see this case across the region, even in Saudi? Is it similar, or is there country differences in these reporting mechanisms and benchmarks?
I think that Saudi is also on their own journey. Like I've started seeing a huge shift even from their part to start going into that, but I can't really comment on it because I haven't really been exposed as much. I've only been in the region now for 7 months.
Okay.
So I'm still,
Fair enough. Fair enough. We have another question about JLL and how JLL collaborates with other companies that are involved in sustainability in a more structured way.
So I think it's very company dependent. So we're always looking for partnerships with organizations that help us enhance our value proposition, but it's on a case-by-case basis.
Then is JLL actively working to minimize its negative impact and maximize its positive impact? How does JLL differentiate between these two goals, and what challenges does it face in increasing positive impact in the commercial real estate services sector?
So I think for positive impact is we're trying to help our clients get on that journey. So we look at it as, even if you haven't asked for us to help you along your sustainability journey, you're just asking us for a different type of service, we always try to embed sustainability into the way and the value that we provide our clients. It doesn't have to be an additional scope. It just here's how we look at it, and this is how it's going to impact you. So for example, if you're doing a highest and best use assessment, highest and best use also is impacted by what's going to happen over the future, right? So whether it's the UAE's net zero goals, whether it's Saudi's net zero goals. So I think we always incorporate that into the way we do our work. And we're always looking at ways of minimizing our carbon footprint. So employees are challenged for whatever they want to do on their journey. And, it's every day is a day to get better. And we are held accountable for all our actions. So it's nice to see, and we have ways to recommend. So or employees get opportunities to make recommendations to our reporting standards to say, hey, we'd love to see this happen. So it's an agile organization.
What would be your recommendations for companies to get started? I know you've mentioned a lot through the course of the last 50 minutes, but as a summary and as an action point, what would you recommend for companies to start, continue their sustainability journey? And then at an individual level, what people could do? So if you could give a list of recommendations.
Sure. I think we have to see sustainability as an imperative. It's no longer a good to do. It's not a nice to have anymore. I feel like it's becoming it's a business necessity now. So I think what companies need to start doing, if you're starting on that journey, is just understand where you're at. How is legislations going to impact you? So you need to look at best practices globally. You need to start looking at, peer organizations as to how do you actually compare. And if you don't know, start, doing some research. And then really, once you want to start on that journey, is to become really clear on the why. Make that value proposition, have a plan in place, like really create a plan that's like 3 to 5 years, if that's what you're open and willing to do. And then look at what does every year mean? Let's break it down, because even 5 years time to do a sustainability journey is a long time. I think it's breaking it down into manageable chunks, quick wins versus long-term investments. And for those who are on a personal level, is you need to start changing your behaviors at home. You need to start, every time you go and buy a cup of coffee, maybe take your own bottle with you. When you need a water bottle, try to avoid, making those small changes. You start to notice a behavioral shift. And if the demand for these things start to decrease, hopefully, regionally, we'll start to see a shift happening, right? Maybe that's where consumer behaviors really impact. The demand and supply go together, right? If the demand decreases for water bottles, there's going to be less supply of them, hopefully. Fingers crossed. But I think for everybody, it's a way of living. I think you need to embrace that as just a way of doing things on a day-to-day basis, and don't make it only about the business proposition. It has to be a personal proposition as well.
Yeah, no, I really like that. I do think it has to be a personal proposition as well. Otherwise, it's a bit hypocritical.
Absolutely.
I have 2 more questions that have come up, Alida. So
Sure.
Sukriti asks about in resource management, it's usually done electricity, water, waste, which is usually controlled by building owners or companies that are leasing these office spaces. And therefore, you don't have the ability to control this as a tenant. And working with some companies, a lot of people say we don't have control over these aspects because we don't own the building. So how can this be managed? How can building owners be pushed to act responsibly?
You know, I get asked that question so often, and I wish there was a magic bullet answer to that. But I think asking the right questions, you know, even considering green leases, for example, when you're renewing your leases, incorporating things into your lease to say, if you wish for us to retain us as your tenant, we need these types of, you know, these are our requirements. And where there's inability to meet you where you are, then of course you can take your business to a different building. However, in the lack of the fact that there's not as many green buildings around as we would like, and maybe people can't afford the premiums that come with it, is starting to shift what you can within the organization, right? You can start reaching out to organizations that do recycling, have them come to your organization, collect them for you. So there's many changes that as an organization you can take yourself, rather than always saying, well, they don't do it so well, khalas, I'm all done, I'm not going to do it.
Yeah, fair enough. We have the last question from Chris, where he talks about raising awareness on indoor air quality and from a productivity perspective, as well as improving the health of society. How do you see indoor air quality fitting the ESG agenda at JLL and of your clients?
I think indoor air quality is sometimes not given as much importance as it should, because it impacts everything you do, right? You're in that building. We spend 90% of our times inside buildings. And if your indoor air quality is poor, you will start to see either health problems, you will start to see productivity loss, attention span. Like there's so many different ways indoor air quality impacts us. And I think that's an area where if you have the ability to measure your indoor air quality, which you can bring experts in to check the quality of it, that's where you can actually go to building owners and say, hey, this is not acceptable to us. But I think JLL has really incorporated being in green and sustainable buildings, and we're starting to see the benefits of it. It's like my productivity, and I keep saying this all the time, has doubled, if not tripled. Just because I'm happy to be at work and I'm happy to be there. I don't need to go downstairs to defrost myself or to get fresh air. Like, you know, I'm okay in the space that I'm in.
Yeah, no, I can't wait to try this green building myself. It's really nice to talk about
We
it.
have one last question from Vishal, who is a master's student who is passionate about sustainability and I think everything around it. He says he's looking to make meaningful impact in the field. What specific skills and expertise do you believe are most valuable for successful venturing into a career in sustainability? And what do you advise you would give to someone like me, like a new student?
I'm just so happy that you're in the field of sustainability, because I think that's future careers that a lot of students don't consider anymore. I'm a youth champion by heart, in my heart. So I would say, you know, embrace an agile mindset. That's the first thing, because sustainability is truly an evolving area. So there's not one specific skill I would say that if you took this specific course, this makes you an expert. It's about lifelong learning. So continuously figuring out what is that niche that you really enjoy. Is it, you know, measuring your carbon footprint? Is it indoor air quality, for example? Is it the social element? What is it about sustainability that you really love? Really become an expert. So sustainability is kind of like, you need to know so much. It's a very, very broad topic. So you need to understand the holistic, but then become an expert on something, you know, and be it net zero strategy, for example. But when you know it so well that it positions yourself in a way that, because it's a niche market, the talent is so short in this. It's very sparse in this area. So there's a war on talent when it comes to sustainability. So get really good at something, but understand the broad perspective as well.
I think that's very, very good advice for someone starting out, because there's so many different ways you can go into. I can see we have a last comment from Saudi Arabia, from Amjad Abdulaziz, who says you're always welcome and that he was very happy to have your session. And lots of people have been happy to hear what you said, Alida. I think lots of good insights have come out of it, and maybe new ideas. I hope someone in the audience is also maybe empowered to continue what they're doing and do a little bit more, both on a personal and professional level. What about you, Namrata? We keep going?
No, I think it was an excellent session, Alida. I personally really enjoyed the insights, and I'm sure as well as the audience. Thank you so much for taking the time, for being here, for sharing in such an open manner your learnings, your experiences. We really, really appreciate it. I think on a side note, thank you to everyone who attended. Business Sustainability Talks is really close to Shift Eco as well as the Umbrella Institute. We really want to build this community where there's open conversation, where we can co-share what other people are doing, have a platform where we can ask questions and build that collaboration in in sustainability enthusiasts and professionals. Our conversations and our events are continuously going on. Thank you again, Alida. Thank you to everyone that attended. Have a great day.